I spent 3 months turning a real Wii into a handheld. It burned me, broke multiple times, and at one point started smoking in my hands.
The frick?
But somehow, it works. This is the Ashida, a fully custom handheld that plays Wii, GameCube, and even N64 games, all on original Wii hardware, no emulation. And this is the story of how I built it, starting from the very beginning, when I was just figuring out what I was getting myself into. But first, the origin story. The Ashida was first created by a modder named Wesk on the BitBuilt forums. When he first set out to make the Ashida, portable Wiis with GameCube grips had been made before, but most were built with hand-wired boards and Franken-case parts. Wesk wanted something different, a portable Wii that was easy to build and fully 3D printed. To make that possible, the projects had to solve 5 huge problems: software, compute, power, physical design, and audio-video. If any one of those parts failed, the build wouldn't work. But once Wesk solved them, the Ashida became one of the cleanest Wii portables I'd ever seen. When I saw it, I knew I had to build one. So after finding all the tools and the parts, I was ready to go. But before I could shrink the Wii, it would need new software. For portable builds, one tool is essential: RV Loader. Think of it as the operating system for portable Wiis. It tracks battery levels, monitors temps, and it also gets rid of the disk drive, so games load directly from an SD card, which is kind of essential when a disk is bigger than the handheld you're trying to build. So after finagling with some files and copying over some games, legally, RV Loader was installed, but the Wii was still far too big to fit in my hand, so the next step was something that feels completely wrong: cutting the motherboard in half. How is cutting a motherboard in half even possible? Well, most of the important hardware on the Wii lives in one small area: the CPU, GPU, RAM, and storage. So modders came up with the OMG WTF trim. Yes, that's actually what it's called. The trim removes the parts the portable doesn't need, like the disk drive, large connectors, and other hardware, while leaving the core intact. Then, you can replace all of the big parts with smaller PCBs. So once I finished taking the Wii completely apart, I carefully marked the trim lines with a ruler and a Sharpie, making sure everything was exact. And then came the scary part. I took a Dremel and started cutting the motherboard. If this went wrong, I'd have to scrap it all over and do a whole new one. I slipped once or twice, but in the end, the cut came out pretty clean. After that, I spent a long time sanding the edges. The copper flakes can cause shorts, so I worked through finer and finer grits until they were buttery smooth. After all of that, the massive Wii motherboard became something tiny, but cutting it created a new problem: power. One part of the motherboard I removed contained the Wii's voltage regulators. These parts convert wall power and do exactly what the Wii needs to run. If any of those voltages are wrong, the system simply won't turn on. But since the Ashida uses batteries, we use a replacement regulator board called the PMS2. With the PMS2, I'll be able to power up the trim to see if it still works. So to test it, I wired each voltage line from the PMS to the Wii. I plugged in the batteries, connected it up to the TV, and hit the power switch. And nothing happened. But after looking over everything, I realized the problem wasn't the wiring or the trim. It was the video adapter. Of all the things, I just had the wrong one connected. Once I fixed that, the system finally booted, and the brain of the portable was alive. With the motherboard working, it was time to start assembly. The entire shell of the Ashida is 3D printed. Wesk designed it using 3D scans of a GameCube controller, with some reshaping to fit all the internals. I printed the case, removed the supports, and spent a long time wet sanding, just for a clean finish. Seriously, maybe a bit too long. But after I was done, I took apart the test setup and then screwed the boards in. Then came the controls. Instead of designing new ones, the Ashida borrows them directly from a Wii Classic controller. So I tore it open for the stick boxes and triggers, the same used in original GC controllers, and bought some buttons online to complete the look. I then connected up all those parts to the GC Plus, a board that acts as the controller for the build. Once all of that was installed, the handheld could actually accept real inputs. Finally came the screen and speakers. The Wii outputs audio and video signals, but they aren't directly usable by portable hardware. So the Ashida uses additional boards to convert them. An audio amp operates the speaker and headphones, and a driver board converts video signals into data the screen can display. So I wired up the video and audio lines from those boards directly to the motherboard. There were a few small places I had to wire to for audio, but once I got those done, I mounted the screen and the speakers, connected power, and turned it on. The fan spun up, the screen lit up, and with my luck, nothing else happened. After looking the Wii up and down, I found the problem. Two small components near the video chip were missing, a resistor and a capacitor. Without them, the system couldn't output video correctly. In theory, this was an easy fix. Replace two components, reinstall software, done. But hold on, those two components are the size of dust. So after another 30 minutes of trying to attach the components, I can now finally flip the power switch to see if it turned on. And finally, it booted. For a second I just stared, because it actually worked. So I held my breath and launched a game. Everything was working exactly as it should, and then everything went downhill. One of the batteries started smoking. I yanked it out as fast as I could. Burn marks were on the contacts and the battery was ash black. 30 seconds earlier, it was working perfectly. Now it looked absolutely destroyed. I didn't get footage of this part, so I'll try to act out what happened. I tried to figure out what went wrong. I checked voltages, looked for shorts, and did everything else you can do with a multimeter. And then, the console started smoking again. At that point, I just shut everything down, and sat there for a second. Because it was just working. It was almost complete. Now the project I had worked on for months was on the verge of falling apart, and I had no idea why. A few days later, I came back to see if I could save the Ashida, or if it was all over. I started with the battery. Lithium-ion cells have a metal outer casing connected to the negative terminal. A small paper ring separates it from the positive terminal. That ring had shifted. The two terminals made contact. Instant short circuit. So that explained the battery, but not the rest of it. Because I had somehow managed to short the screen driver board. While measuring voltages, I touched the wrong components. Instant short. The good news is that the Wii trim still works. The bad news is that I had to replace the batteries and the driver board. But to be honest, I'm just grateful the project isn't over. While waiting for those parts, I decided I'd add a few extra upgrades. The first was restoring the system clock. Not too bad. Then I tackled the Bluetooth relocation. The original connector for the module was trimmed off, so the only way to reconnect it was by soldering two wires onto microscopic traces on the board. But after one or two tries, it worked. After a week or two, the replacement screen board finally arrived. This is when the whole project came together, the last step in assembly. I installed the board, rewired the video, and fixed a few small issues here and there. And finally, I flipped the power switch. And wouldn't you know, everything worked. Perfect image, perfect sound, no smoke. It was time to put in the final screws. And now that it's all together, here it is, the Ashida. It's a system that truly conquers the big 5 problems of portabilizing, and then some. First off, it feels amazing to play and looks great. The game sounds solid through both the headphones and the speakers. There is some distortion at higher volumes, but at lower levels, it's clear. The screen is 480p, not the high resolutions we're used to, but since that's what these games were designed for, it looks surprisingly good. The design is ergonomic thanks to the GameCube grips, and it feels natural in the hands. It is a bit heavy, but when you're sitting down, it's easy to forget about. Most of the custom boards in this build came from 4-layer tech, and so far, they have done everything they were advertised to do, and more, even if they were a bit pricey. And because it's powered by a real Wii, all Wii and GameCube games run at full speed, and with RV Loader, everything is customizable. I even added my own menu backgrounds. You might ask, why not just use something like a Steam Deck with Dolphin installed? And that's a fair point, if your only goal is to play Wii games. But that wasn't the goal here. The goal was to build something I'm proud of, and something that taught me new skills. Throughout this project, there were moments where I thought I had destroyed it, moments where it started smoking, and moments where I had no idea how to fix it. But now, every time I pick it up, I know exactly what's inside, and that's what makes the Ashida special to me. Anyways, thanks to Wesk, 4-layer tech, and BitBuilt for making this possible. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.